And now let's go straight to our NBN debate with the Deputy PM and Communications Minister Anthony Albanese and the Opposition's Communications spokesman Malcolm Turnbull. Gentlemen, welcome.
Good to be with you.
I'd like us to cover three broad areas tonight: the various costs of your respective NBN policies, the time frame which you expect to be able to deliver those in, and the technologies which will be afforded by your various incarnations of the NBN. Let me start with you, Mr Albanese, and specifically with one of the key issues. That is, you want to take fibre directly to people's homes. Mr Turnbull, on the other hand, thinks it's best to take it to the street corner, the so-called nodes. Tell us, first of all, why is it important to take fibre all the way to people's homes?
Well, it is important that we embrace best technology and that Australia deserves the best. When it comes to fibre to the premise, whether it be to the home or the business, what that will ensure is that you have download speeds of 100 megabits per second, upload speeds, importantly, particularly for business, of 400 megabits per second. You'll have it under our plan for the same price whether you live in the city or in a region. So that is really important in terms of wholesale pricing. You'll also make sure that you do it once and that you do it right, and you do it with fibre. When countries overseas have had plans like Malcolm's fibre to the node plan, New Zealand had it, they were doing it, they stopped and said, no, we're better off doing it once and getting the best technology rather than going back and retrofitting it in the future. So this is really about providing a future stimulus to the way that our economy operates, but importantly, it will transform the way that education, health and aged care services are delivered. It will make smart manufacturing so that we can compete in our region, and of course transform also the way that agriculture occurs in this country.
And we'll get a chance to discuss all of those. Mr Turnbull, why do you say your fibre to the node, to the street corner, is better?
Well, it's just getting the right mix of technologies. We're not critical of fibre to the premises. Indeed, under our plan, at least 20% of premises would be connected by fibre right into those premises. You use the technology that delivers the service you need in the most timely and cost-effective way. The balance here is between the cost of deployment, the time it takes you to deploy it, and the service level you deliver. Now, Anthony mentioned 100 megabits per second as being deliverable over fibre to the premises, and it certainly is. But it's also now deliverable and being delivered over fibre to the node at 400 metres distance from the node, which is a remarkable development in terms of the modern technologies. The approach that we are talking about taking.
So you say you can deliver the same thing?
You can deliver 100 megabits per second at 400 up to 400 metres away from the node on the existing legacy copper. Now, the reason you do that, the reason you keep that last 2 or 3 or 4 or 500 metres of copper, is because you save 3/4 or more of the construction cost and 3/4 or more of the time. And you can nonetheless deliver very, very high speeds. So you have to remember that speed is only of value to you insofar as you have applications that need it. If you're a household and you want to have a high definition video stream that needs 6 megs, well, with 100 megs you could be downloading, streaming simultaneously 15 of them. That is quite a lot of video. Now, the approach we're taking is the same that Deutsche Telekom is taking right now in Germany. British Telecom is taking right now in Britain. AT&T is taking right now in the United States, in Belgium, in Austria,
and I think it's fair to say that they're doing that because that's what they can afford. Let's go to the next point.
Does that mean that money has no object in Australia, that we are so rich that we can blast away billions of dollars without worrying about the cost?
Let's talk about how much the various policies are going to cost. Anthony Albanese, is the government still confident that it can connect fibre to 8.5 million premises by 2021 for the sum total of $37.4 billion?
We are absolutely, and important, Emma, it's 1,000 megabits, not 100 as Malcolm suggested. That
you said 100.
Sorry.
Well, it's 1,000 megabits per second.
So, but you said 100, but you meant to say 1,000.
It's 1,000 megabits per second in terms of the download.
Thanks for clearing that up.
400 upload. And And what that will do is at a government equity, that is government debt, of $30.4 billion. Malcolm's plan is for 25, he says he can guarantee.
No, I'm talking about... let's take this one at a time. Tell us... We'll talk to Malcolm Turnbull about his plan.
Can we talk about yours?
No, I want to talk about yours. Will you commit to be able to deliver by 2021 8.5 million premises with fibre for $37.4 billion sum total?
Absolutely. And the important thing is, it's not just me, it's been the corporate plan was considered by KPMG. They found that it was, in terms of the timelines and the costings, that all the assumptions were good.
Okay, so you're sticking by those figures. Now, Malcolm Turnbull, you say Labor's project will in fact cost $94 billion to complete, and that yours will be $29.5 billion on the other hand. Now, where do those figures come from, considering you've had no access to the NBN Co accounts or to its commercial agreements?
Well, we have had access to their corporate plan, and we have had access to a financial model for the NBN. You're right, the NBN Co has not been very transparent, and indeed Anthony is sitting on the latest corporate plan, the latest revision of the business plan, and has not released it to the public.
Can you answer my direct question, which is where did you get the $94 billion from, first of all?
OK, I'll tell you. We changed 4 important assumptions. The NBN Co's business plan has a ridiculously over-optimistic view of its revenues. It believes that its broadband revenues will increase by 9% in real terms for 10 years. That is without precedent and contradicted.
The revenues?
The revenues.
But we're talking about the cost.
Hang on.
You've said their project will cost $94 billion, which is different to revenue.
Well,
let's not confuse the issues here. It's already confusing enough.
OK, if you just let me finish, I'll explain. The peak funding requirement of this project is the sum of the revenues over the construction period, and the costs. So, in other words, the cost is...
Isn't the cost just what it costs to build the network?
Well, because that is offset in part by the revenue. So the more revenues you've got that you're earning on the way through, the less is your peak funding requirement. But let's not have an argument about accounting. Let me just work.
No, but I'd like to, because it was on the front page of many newspapers. It was trumpeted by yourself on your blog and so on, that this, instead of costing $37 billion, was going to cost $94 billion. No, and I'm curious to know where you get those figures.
The peak funding requirement under the Labor Party's plan, which is the sum of revenues and costs, is $44 billion. The peak funding requirement, as assessed by us, is $94 billion. And the difference comes from the fact that they have dramatically overestimated their revenues. They have underestimated the cost of construction, and you're seeing that. So we adjusted the cost of construction from $2,400 per premise to $3,600, and you've already seen contractors going broke, contractors demanding increased rates, and increased rates being given. So there's a lot of evidence to support that. We've also assumed that they will take at least 4 more years to complete the project, which brings with it added costs. And we've assumed that there will be more wireless-only households than they have assumed. Now, those 4 assumptions about revenues, cost of construction, wireless-only households and time are very reasonable ones. We put them out more than 4 months ago, and nobody has been able to say that our assumptions are unreasonable, or that, given those assumptions, you would not end up with a $94 billion figure. And you'd think if they were wrong, in more than 4 months, the government or the NBN Co or somebody would have said, no, Malcolm, you've got that number wrong. And no one has said that.
Mr Albanese, are they wrong?
They have been plucked out of a Cocoa Pops packet. This is an absolute nonsense with no basis in fact. And indeed, the Joint Parliamentary Committee, of which Malcolm is a member, did consider this and found there was no basis in fact. The NBN Co costs are now based upon, because it's being rolled out, are based upon actuals. What is actually occurring right now with the rollout. So this isn't some theoretical basis. There's been proper scrutiny by major accountancy firms of the NBN Co business plans, ticked off by Cabinet, a transparent process, all of those processes released for the public. And the difference comes down to $37 billion, yes, in terms of the cost of build. That's the CapEx figure. In terms of government borrowings, however, it's just $30.4 billion. Because the business plan stacks up, the market's prepared to lend to NBN Co, which is the difference between the two. Malcolm's plan requires, because there is no business case, requires $29.5 billion.
You reject the $94 billion figure?
Absolutely. There is a 3% difference, a 3% difference in cost of government borrowing between the two plans, but our plan delivers speeds that are 40 times faster, and that will need to be just done once and got it right. This is like building a 2-lane harbour bridge, or it's like what happened with the Opera House now, where we have $1 billion needed to fix it up because cost-cutting, politicians interfered, cut costs when it was first built, and then it is always more expensive to go back and retrofit.
Well, Emma, let me just address a couple
looks like notes,
let me address a couple of specifics. Under their corporate plan, the average revenue per customer starts at $22 a month, and by 2020-21 rises to $62 a month.
Can we get to that? But we're not talking about what
Sorry,
it's
you don't want to
cost.
get... Well, you've allowed Anthony to say, I pulled these figures out of a Cocoa Pop. I'm going to give you the details, and you don't want to hear me.
But you're talking about revenue, and my question was about the cost of construction. We need to be comparing apples for apples if we're to have a coherent debate.
Well,
let me continue. Mr Turnbull, how can the coalition claim to be able to deliver an NBN faster and cheaper without the cost-benefit analysis that you claim the government didn't do itself in the first place?
Well, we've done very extensive work on the cost of the different technologies. The reality is that doing fibre to the node is much cheaper because you don't have to dig up every street.
But is it still going to be cheaper given what's already underway and the contracts that have already been signed? And do your figures also take account of the fact that you will be having to pay Telstra, presumably, to maintain that extra copper? Well,
in preparing for this interview, I know you read our policy very carefully, and you'll see we've assumed and dealt with all of those issues in the 60-page policy we put out 4 months ago, and which the Deputy Prime Minister is saying is equivalent to pulling numbers out of a box of Cocoa Pops. And it shows the lack of regard he has for this important project and for the careful analysis of it that we've done, that he is not able to or prepared to come to grips with any of the details.
Mr Albanese, let me put something to you, because you recently said that connection to Labor's NBN was free. But households will be charged to access it, won't they?
Of course they will, like you get charged when you use any service. But the connection is free. Malcolm's plan will charge...
The connection is free?
In terms of to the home, the infrastructure is free. It's delivered, and then you provide... This is
it's accessible, but it's not free.
No, once you use it, of course, you get charged for a service. But we know now that broadband, NBN, people who are connected up, are being able to access the NBN for prices that are cheaper or the same price as ADSL, up to figures like $29.95 packages.
But is that for the full 100 megabits per second or 1,000, sorry?
Well, what's interesting, Emma, is that already of those people who are taking up the NBN, 1/3 are taking it up at a speed, because the higher the speed, the higher the price, as you'd expect. This is the market in operation, for a speed that's higher than will be delivered under the copper system being advocated by Malcolm. And with regard to the cost before, I'm not making things up. KPMG, an accountancy firm, have audited the accounts. That is what I'm relying upon, the facts, not just a policy document.
KPMG
with a
audited the
with
accounts.
A figure,
they did not warrant the accuracy of the business plan.
They absolutely
They did not.
Absolutely. KPMG and other accountancy firms
they'll have something to say about this tomorrow.
Have looked at the business plan.
Well, why don't you produce the latest business plan? It's sitting on your desk. Why don't you produce it? The company gave it to you only a month or so ago.
That's not right. They have not produced the final business plan.
Oh, I see. You've made them keep the draft stamp on it so you don't have to give it out before the election.
They have not produced the final business plan.
You've got a time bomb ticking away in that.
When they do...
You've got a confession from the company that they're failing and you don't want to let the public know.
When they do, Malcolm, it will be released publicly as all of these processes have been transparent.
Will you be releasing it before the election?
Well, if we receive it, it's got to be gone through the cabinet process. Of course, we are now in caretaker mode.
Do you have reason to believe they have received it?
They have undoubtedly received it, haven't they?
No.
Oh, you haven't?
We have not received the final business plan, no.
Oh, well...
When you say final business plan, how is that different to the final business plan that was presented in December 2010? Plans are normally done beforehand, aren't they, not during a project?
Yes, but there's an annual plan. That's the important thing here, Emma, is that there is more scrutiny and more transparency of this project than there is of. I, as the Minister, am shareholder of a range of organisations, including the Australian Rail Track Corporation, etc. What we receive is an annual report that goes through a process of independent outside assessment.
It's to June 30?
Goes through Cabinet. That's right.
To June 30?
That's right.
And we're now August 12th, haven't received it yet?
That's right. No, we have not received...
Have you got a date for receiving?
We have not received... Well, that's up to the board, but we have not received the final business plan.
Okay.
Can I just raise one question? Are you saying that under Labor you can have the NBN at no cost? Is that what you're saying?
No, of course, in terms of services being delivered. When you buy a service, you purchase it, of course.
Well, why does your Labor Party flyers, here's
There's
one,
all your notes.
Say, this is one of yours.
Get access to the NBN for
Labor
free.
believes everyone should have the NBN at no cost, not just those who can afford it. That is what you guys are putting into every letterbox in Australia, and you've just confirmed it is a lie.
And you're
the Deputy Prime Minister.
Let me make a point, Mr Turnbull, because I think I understand where the discrepancy lies here, and that is that under your plan, fibre won't be going all the way to the home.
Correct.
So
well, not every home. No, it'll go
You've got to pay for it.
Greenfields.
You've got to pay for it. $5,000.
Well, a lot less than that, but anyway, it will.
You've said thousands.
How much will it cost if a household does want to upgrade at some point in the future to be able to access fibre directly to their home?
Well, I think it's very unlikely that many, if any, will, because the speeds available on VDSL, vectored VDSL, fibre to the node, are so high.
Will they also allow the 1,000 megabits, 1 gigabit?
Well, let me just put this to you. Let's say Anthony said that fibre to the premises can deliver 1 gigabit per second, 1,000 megs, and you're quite right, it can. Do you know what it would cost to have a guaranteed 1 gig service? At least $20,000 a month. $20,000 a month in combined virtual circuit charges. So you see, when they talk about this massive capacity, and say this has got to be made available.
Sorry, who's going to be paying $20,000 a month?
Because see, Andy doesn't understand how this thing is priced. Let me explain.
No one's as smart as you, Malcolm.
That is certainly not true. But when you are a retail service provider, you're Telstra or Optus or whatever, you have to buy a pipe of certain capacity from the customer's premises, your customer's premises, back to the exchange, the point of interconnection. And the size of that pipe will determine how much contention your customers have.
I think we're getting a little more technical for the purposes of this discussion.
You always shut me down when I'm about to make the most important point. Okay, well, you don't want to, but let me just tell you something, Emma. The reality is this. If you want to have a guaranteed 1 gig service, your retail service provider will have to buy 1 gig of CVC for you, and that is going to cost $20,000 a month.
For the average household?
Well, for any household, which is why, by the way, nobody will buy it other than businesses that need a very big pipe.
Do you actually know how much a household would have to spend to access 1,000 megabits, 1 gigabit?
Well, the market, of course, will determine that.
Do you have an estimate?
What we're doing here is building the infrastructure, and then the market operates with competition. And what we know is
what's the wholesale price for one gigabit?
What we know also is that the price comes down over a period period of time. And what we know also, when it comes to usage, a Year 7, I've got a son in Year 7.
Are you going to answer my question, first of all? Sorry.
The amount of, well, the market will determine these things, Emma. This is not a government-owned monopoly.
Doesn't that
here.
exist in your plans? An indication of what that will cost?
The market will determine this, Emma. What we're doing is building the infrastructure. It will go to the home and to the business for free, which is what Mr Gray is talking about in that pamphlet. It will go to the business and the home for free. Then the market will operate with competition. See, this is as a result as well of the effort that we made for the structural separation of Telstra, not done when Telstra was privatised as should have occurred under the former government, something I think that Malcolm would concede. And at the same time, you had that not fixed and you had 22 separate broadband plans. What we've done is introduce a system whereby it will go to the home and to the business. Get it right, do it once. Do it with fibre, not with copper. This was a debate for 1910, copper versus iron. It is not a debate in terms of fibre versus copper.
Let me put it this way.
In 2013.
Is it fair to say that the fundamental difference between the two parties' policies is that Labor wants to socialise the infrastructure and the Coalition prefers a user-pay system?
No, that's not the case. There is a degree of socialisation in all networks because, you know, everybody pays a price, whether it's a water network or electricity or whatever, and there is a lot of cross-subsidisation. But the big difference is that we believe we can deliver the benefits of very fast broadband much sooner at less cost to the taxpayer and consequently more affordably for customers. Now, can I just pick up on one point? Anthony said the prices are going to come down. Their own business plan says that the average user charge is going to treble. The NBN Co is forecasting that by 2024 it will have revenues double that Deutsche Bank forecasts for the industry. So their forecast is that they are going to soak and soak and soak Australian consumers. They're going to dramatically increase the share of wallet that is going to fixed telecoms, and we say that is neither equitable nor, frankly, achievable. Australians already are paying 30% more for broadband than their American cousins and twice as much as people in Europe. And this is going to make broadband in Australia even less affordable. So it's a lose for the taxpayer and a lose for the consumer. And Anthony can bluster about Cocoa Pop packets and iron and so forth as much as he likes. The facts are in his own documents. And he should have the respect for this debate and the billions of taxpayers' dollars that are being used in it to actually address the specific issues that we've raised and the criticisms that have been raised by the NBN Co's many critics.
Well, can I ask you,
a final
Malcolm,
comment, Mr Albanese. Tell us, why do Australian households actually need 1 gigabit?
Because it's about what we need just now, but also into the future. As I said, you know, a Year 7 student today will need use 6 times the internet usage that they use today by the time they reach Year 12. The expansion in terms of services that are used in terms of the internet across a whole range of services, health, education, aged care, as well as, of course, for business, where high-speed broadband is important because of the amount of data that's got to be downloaded.
1 gigabit?
This is critical. Well, already businesses are saying that what they want is much greater than what Malcolm Turnbull's plan offers. I've done, for example, in Rosebery, just the other day, I was with the Australian Industry Group at a manufacturing plant. They want the NBN. They want access so that they compete with our neighbours. And what we have, you've got to look at where the money goes as well. Look at where Malcolm's money's gone. He's invested in French Telecom, which is having fibre to the home, not to the node.
They're doing VDSL, I promise you. They're like every telco in the world. They're doing a bit of both, and as the VDSL technologies have improved, they're doing much more of that. And just make this point about advanced manufacturing.
You talk a lot about other countries, Mr.
Yeah.
Turnbull, but I would point out that the Nordic countries are pioneers, and in fact, just in the last few months, Sweden, the Swedish government announced that its aim was to have 90% of households by 2020 with fibre to the premises.
Well, a lot of governments set those goals in very grand ways, but they're very rarely achieved. The reality is that what's happened over the last decade, the cost differential between fibre to the premise of 3 or 4 or 5 to 1 and fibre to the node has remained there. But what's happened is that the speeds that are available over fibre to the node have improved dramatically to the point where, as I said, you can get 100 megs at 400 metres of copper from the node now with vectored VDSL. Now that is literally revolutionary, and that's why Deutsche Telekom is going to do very little fibre to the premise, mostly fibre to the node. British Telecom, which was going to do 25% fibre to the premise, is now only doing 10%, and people are changing the balance. You see, the mistake this government made, the Labor government made, was promising a specific technology. The smarter thing would have been to say, we will make sure that everyone gets very fast broadband as soon as possible, and we will use whatever are the most cost-effective technologies at the time, and that way you don't lock yourself into a technology that turns out to be much more time-consuming to implement and much more expensive to build. And can I just say one point about advanced manufacturing? I agree that businesses like that do need very high bandwidth, and they are exactly the places where you should have very big pipes, fibre into those factories and design centres, but that doesn't mean you need to have it into every house, bedsit, apartment, villa, whatever, all around the country. You've got to be a bit smarter about this, otherwise you end up not getting the jolly thing built, and you take decades, and of course you can run up billions and billions of dollars of unnecessary expense.
A very brief final word, Anthony Albanese.
A couple of points. One is that copper isn't just about the speed, it's about reliability. And fibre is much more reliable than copper is. Copper has problems so that, for example, delivery of health services, the advice is that if you're about delivering health services, aged care, keeping people in the home for longer, that the NBN will be able to do to transform that, then you need reliability. That's why fibre is critical. Secondly, in terms of cost, it is 30.4 compared with 29.5. A marginal cost difference
versus 29.5.
A marginal cost difference in terms of government investment, but an enormous difference in terms of capacity. And importantly, this is an investment. It's an investment that will produce a 7% return to government. This isn't like spending something where the money's just gone. It will bring an investment back. And in the 2010 election, Malcolm Cripp was very critical of our plan, the fact that it was off budget. If you'd recall that whole debate, that was the centre of it. Oh, it's a rort, it's off budget, and they used chopping off the NBN as savings measures for other policies that they had. This time round, they're accepting that it's off budget. They're accepting, therefore, that it will produce a return, and they're using the same system, except they've got $29.5 billion of government debt off budget.
We have to wrap it there, unfortunately. I thank you both so much for coming in this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.